Hello everybody. Today I wanted to show you Tic Tac Toe in a very basic, easy form of Tic Tac Toe. I've seen others out there that are posted on YouTube. They're okay. That's the very first game that I made was Tic Tac Toe. Unfortunately, I don't think that some of them were made as good as what they could have been. They're a little bit more complex than what they need to be. So today I'm going to show you how to make a fairly simple tic-tac-toe. My game's already made, so I'm going to go ahead and go over it briefly. What we have here is we're just using some picture boxes. We got picture box 1, picture box 2, picture box 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So what I've done here is I've created a grid for myself, starting out with picture box 1, and so on and so forth. Now what I've done is I've gone one step further. If we take a look at the code, what we have here is we have A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, C1, etc., etc. So how this works is just like a standard grid: A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, C1, C2, C3. Alright, so pretty simple there on why these are here. So next thing we probably want to look at is turn. Well, obviously turn means you win a turn, so you just add 1 to the turn. In fact, I'll go ahead and show you. Here's my code. This code pretty much just repeats itself, so I'll go over it real quickly with you. Now, as I was saying, turn, right here is my turn. When we click on this box, it's +1 to turn. So turn right now is equal to 1. Alright, so it just adds 1 to that every time we click. And it doesn't care how high that goes or how low that goes. Alright, so the next thing I want to go over, when you think of turns, I think of light switches. I think you're turning on a light switch or you're turning it off. Alright, so what we have here, I'll go ahead and close this and we'll come back to it real quick in just a second, is we have this right here. This is very simple. If turn 1 is true, which is player 1, then it's your turn. If it's turn 2, it's your turn. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's either the light switch is on or it's off. You're either on turn X or you're on turn O. Doesn't really matter. The computer doesn't know and it doesn't care. It just says, it's either turned on or turned off. It's pretty basic. Now, our load event, this is pretty important right here. You need to tell the game, who's going to start first. Is it going to be turn 1 or turn 2? Obviously, X usually goes first traditionally, as far as I'm concerned. So, in mine, turn 1 goes first, which is X. So let's go back to our click event. This is basically where everything's going to go on when you start out with your code. So what you're going to do here is you're going to do your turn check, basically. You're going to say, hey, if it was turn 1 and that was true, then A1 on our grid, that's going to equal 1. We're going to change our box to X, and turn 1 is false now. It's no longer player 1. Now it's going to be player 2's turn, and we need to go back up to player turn. So it says, okay, so player 2, it's your turn. Okay, well that means it's X. Okay, now it's O's turn. Now the X's turn is over. So now it's going to skip down here. It's going to say, okay, now what we're going to do here is going to say, okay, we're going to disable this button so you can't click on it anymore. We're going to add +1 to the turn. Well, the turn counter, we should say. And then we're going to check for a win. We're going to check and see if anybody won. Alright, so since nobody won in this case, we're going to move on. We're going to say, let's say that it's O's turn now. Let's say that O clicked on picture box 2. Alright, so our grid's going to equal, B1 is going to equal 2 because somebody clicked there, and we're going to say picture box, we're going to have to give it to picture box O. Now we're going to say your turn is over, and now it's X's turn. Go up to player turn, to find out exactly whose turn it is, we know whose turn it is. It's going to be X. So then we're going to disable this box so you can't click on it anymore. We're going to add 1 to the turn, and we're going to check for the win factor. This is pretty much, you'll repeat this process. It's pretty much the same code you'll use for all 9 boxes. It's not going to change. Tic Tac Toe, think of it as light switch once again. It's the light switch is up or it's down. It's just that simple. Now, where it becomes really annoyingly painful is in the win. Now, I tried to make this as condensed as possible. I have seen people who had algorithms on how to do it. This is pretty much the way I'm doing it. I'm doing it with a series of if statements. So what this does right here is if A1 on our grid and A2 and A3 are all X, then X wins. Or if B1, B2, and B3 are all X, then X wins. And so on and so forth. You just repeat that whole entire process. Like once again, think of it as a grid. That's how you really want to set up your tic-tac-toe box and future games. Anytime you make any game, obviously future games that are more complex will have a much more complex grid, like chess for instance. But we're doing tic-tac-toe and it's pretty simple, but still get in the habit of when you make games that are turn-based, make a grid. It just makes life easier to set it up as a grid as opposed to just throwing whatever out there, every possible variation. It's going to take you forever to code that. Grids just work so much better. Alright, so there's our code for that part, for X. If we come down here, we see O. O is pretty much doing a standard check as well to see, what all is going on here. Another thing that's critical when you're writing your software, or your games, or whatever you're making, comment. Make these comments. Whether if your grammar and spelling is horrible, whatever, who cares? Make sure you put something in there to let you know, or whoever's reading this code, know what's going on, or at least attempt to tell them what's going on. Alright, so what's happening here is if any of these are true, the message box is going to pop up and it's going to say O wins or X wins. The next thing it's going to do, if there is a winner, it's going to reset our game. Alright, so let's say that there isn't a winner. Let's say if we get through all the boxes and nobody wins. That does happen in tic-tac-toe, believe it or not, if you've ever played. So when that happens, this is where we were keeping track of our turns. If our turn counter gets all the way up to 10, we're going to say nobody won. There were no winners, and let's reset the game. So let's go up here and see what reset says. Hey, there it is. Resets turns all the picture boxes back to nothing. It tells you that picture boxes 1 through 9 are re-enabled, that now you can click on them again. And it resets our grid, the values on our grid. So they're all set to 0 now instead of 1 or 2. So that's pretty much how tic-tac-toe works, as far as I'm concerned at least. It's pretty basic. You guys can feel free to copy and paste this code or do whatever you want with it. It's pretty much out there. So I hope you enjoy, post, commit, whatever you want to do. Alright, thanks.